The battlefield was silent now. Smoke crawling across the shattered ground like ghosts searching for bodies. Metal ruins twisted in the air like black claws, ships burning in the sky above. But no one moved near the glowing stasis field in the center of it all. Inside that field stood the alien princess, Zyrene, her long silver hair floating around her like mist, her eyes closed, her hands gently resting at her sides, her body still but far from lifeless. She had not spoken since the war began. And yet armies fell where she passed. Soldiers fled when her eyes opened. Even the machines refused to target her, as if they feared what she truly was. It was said she held the key of echoes inside her heart, a power ancient enough to end stars. Or perhaps awaken the thing sleeping beneath the red crater. No one knew for sure, and no one wanted to find out. The alien commanders built her prison with the help of the old builders. A glowing dome of shifting light that burned anything with a pulse, vaporized entire squads when they tried to reach her. So they left her there, a living weapon behind a cage no one could touch. And they warned every species, do not approach, do not speak, do not even look for too long. And yet, someone was moving now across the broken field, stepping over bodies and shattered drones, one foot dragging slightly, armor cracked, helmet in one hand, hair messy and red from blood, a human soldier. He had no rank patch, no working comes, and no fear in his eyes, only a crooked grin and the kind of walk that said he had nothing left to lose. The watching soldiers gasped, shouted through the radios, tried to call him back, but he didn't stop. He kept walking, straight toward the stasis field, his boots crunching the blackened dirt, his body slow but steady. Someone tried to aim a railgun at him, but the commander barked to hold fire. No one knew what would happen if the field reacted. The human reached the edge of the glowing dome. The air there shimmered like oil, thick and alive. Everyone waited for him to be turned to ash, but nothing happened. The field pulsed once, slow and deep, like it noticed him, like it breathed. He tilted his head, raised one eyebrow, then took another step. The field rippled again, but still didn't strike inside. Princess Zyrene's fingers twitched, her lips moved, and her eyes opened. They were not like any eyes the human had ever seen. They glowed with colors that didn't exist, and yet he saw them anyway. She looked at him not like an enemy, not like prey, but like something unexpected, something impossible. He waved once, slow and casual, then dug into a small pouch on his belt. From it, he pulled a small silver-wrapped square, peeled it, and held out a piece of a protein bar toward her. The air shivered again, more violently now, energy dancing around his fingers. Yet he didn't pull back. Zyrene's eyes narrowed. She took one small step forward, and the ground under her feet cracked from the energy she carried. Still, he stood there, arm out, bar in hand, as if he had nothing better to do in the middle of a cursed battlefield. She tilted her head. Her voice rose like a whisper carried through time, and she asked just one word. Why? The human blinked, smiled again, and replied, because no one else did. The watchers couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, couldn't even process what they were seeing. The field slowly dimmed, just enough to let sound pass clearly. Zyrene looked down at the bar, then back at him, her expression unreadable, her power still pulsing through the air like a living storm waiting to be unchained. The human didn't flinch. He just said, "You look hungry," behind him. Drones reactivated and began scanning the energy levels. Alarms flared across command ships. Scientists yelled in panic. Commanders debated if this was a trap, if the human was infected or mind-controlled. But they all watched, and none of them dared interfere. Zerine stepped forward again, her bare feet hovering slightly above the ground. Her hands now raised, open and empty, the field thinned around the human, no longer burning, now shimmering. Like rain, he stepped through without resistance, now standing inside the dome, face to face with the most feared being in the war. And he smiled, not because he was brave, not because he was foolish, but because in that moment, he saw something in her eyes no one else had seen: loneliness. The dome closed again behind him, sealing them both in light. Gasps echoed through the battlefield, through ships, through command stations. No one knew what she would do next. Would she destroy him, enslave him, bond with him, consume his mind, or simply erase him from existence? She looked down at the protein bar, reached out, took it gently, and broke it in half. She handed him back a piece, then said 2 words, "You stay." And just like that, the war changed, not with blood, not with weapons, but with a broken soldier and a forgotten princess standing together inside a cage meant to keep the universe safe from her. The silence around them was louder than any scream, and far above, hidden in the dark corners of space, something ancient stirred as the bond between human and alien sparked for the first time. They were no longer enemies, no longer weapons, but something else entirely, and no one knew what that meant yet. But everyone could feel that something was coming, and nothing would ever be the same again, because one reckless human had stepped forward, and the princess had not turned away. She had chosen to open her eyes, and that was just the beginning. The air inside the glowing dome felt heavy, not like weight, but like thought, like silence that pressed into the bones and made the heart beat slower. Kane stood still, the half of the protein bar still in his hand, staring at the alien girl who, just moments ago, had been a living myth, now close enough to touch. Zerine stared back, her expression unreadable, her silver-white eyes reflecting something strange, not anger, not fear, but a quiet curiosity that felt more dangerous than either. Outside the dome, soldiers held their breath, sensors blinked red. Commanders whispered across channels that buzzed with static and panic. But inside, Kane shifted his weight, looked around the dome with calm eyes, and finally said, "You know, I expected more furniture." Zerine blinked slowly, the corner of her lips twitching, almost a smile, but not quite. Kane took a small bite of the protein bar, chewed, and shrugged. "Tastes like cardboard, but you probably don't get many snacks in here." She didn't speak, but she did take another step forward, her body floating inches above the ground. As if gravity obeyed her only when she allowed it to, the field between them shimmered, but didn't resist, didn't reject. It simply pulsed with a rhythm that felt like breath. Kane lowered himself to one knee, sat back on the broken stone floor, and looked up at her. "You can sit too, I don't bite." The field trembled again, as if unsure whether to reject his joke or process it. And then Zerine lowered herself down, her robes folding around her like liquid light. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice soft, each word carefully shaped like a blade made of velvet. Kane grinned. Kane Myers, no rank, no squad, probably considered missing or dead, and apparently too dumb to follow orders. She tilted her head, her silver hair drifting like starlight. "Why did you come to me?" Kane looked down at the ground, picked up a pebble, rolled it between his fingers, then said, "Because everyone else ran. Is that bravery or foolishness?" she asked. He laughed once, short and sharp, a little of both, I guess. The dome flickered once only, for a moment, but strong enough that soldiers outside raised their rifles, unsure if it meant danger or something worse. Inside, Kane looked at her more closely now. her skin almost glowing, her eyes like twin galaxies, but her hands were shaking slightly. He leaned forward just a bit and asked, "Are you cold?" Zerine stared, confused. "Cold?" "Yeah," he nodded. "You're shivering." Her eyes narrowed as if she was trying to remember something very old, and finally whispered, "I do not know what that means anymore." Kane stood slowly, stepped closer, just one pace, and said, "It means your body needs warmth. Or comfort, or maybe just a friend." Her breath hitched, just a little, almost like a glitch in her perfect control. And then, without warning, her hand rose and touched the edge of his jacket, her fingers glowing faintly. Kane didn't move, didn't flinch, even when his skin tingled under her touch like electricity. Sliding under the surface, outside the dome, alarm shrieked, and someone shouted that her vitals were spiking. Her energy readings off the chart, but Kane didn't hear them, and even if he had, he wouldn't have moved. Because she was looking at him like he was the first real thing she had seen in years. She whispered, "You are not like the others, Kane." Smirked. "That's what my ex said too." Zerine blinked, confused again. But the air around them warmed, just slightly, just enough to feel real. Then she looked up sharply, her eyes going wide as if she sensed something outside the dome. Something wrong. Kane turned, saw shadows move in just beyond the dome's light. Tall figures cloaked in black armor, alien soldiers moving slowly, weapons drawn but not raised. The commanders had sent in the Obsidian Guard. Kane sighed. "Figures," Zerine stood, her energy flaring without warning, the dome glowing brighter, hotter. The ground cracking under her feet as if afraid of her. She raised her hand and the guard froze mid-step, held in place by invisible chains of power that hummed in the air like a dying star. Kane looked at her, calm but curious. "You gonna fry them?" Zerine didn't answer, her face hard, her eyes blazing like twin suns. The guards began to scream, not from pain but from fear, begging through their helmets for forgiveness, calling her goddess of silence and breaker of names. Kane stepped forward and put his hand on her shoulder. "Zerine," he said, voice steady. "Don't." She turned to him, the light around her flickering, trembling, fighting between rage and restraint. "I am not a weapon," she whispered. "Then don't act like one," he replied. "Show them that." The energy vanished like a breath held too long. And released, the guards collapsed, not dead, but drained, terrified, crawling back from the dome like broken shadows. Zerine stood still, her body shaking now, not from power, but from something deeper, something human. Kane stepped in front of her, looked out at the stunned army watching from the edge of the field, and shouted, "She didn't hurt them, she chose not to. So maybe you should start listening instead of shooting." His voice echoed across the field, into the radios, into the minds of soldiers who had only known her as a threat. Zerine whispered, "They will never see me as anything else." Kane looked at her, smiled softly, and said, "Then let's make them." And somewhere far away, in a dark chamber lit by crystal thrones, something ancient opened its eyes and whispered one word into the void: "Awaken." Because in that moment, a bond was forged not by fear or blood, but by choice. And that bond would change everything that followed. And the universe, whether ready or not, would soon feel its fire, because the human did not flinch, and the princess did not destroy, and something new was born in that silence between them. A promise made without words, and it had only just begun. The dome still shimmered around them, alive with silent heat and silent questions. Kane stood close to Zerine now, close enough to feel the strange rhythm of energy coming from her skin. Not fire, not ice, something in between, something ancient. And awake, outside, the alien army stayed frozen, unsure whether to attack or bow. Unsure whether the dome was still a prison or a temple now. Zerine turned slowly, her robes trailing behind her like starlight soaked in memory, her voice quiet and flat, yet cutting through the tension like a blade made of breath. They fear me, but they do not understand me, Kane nodded, watching her eyes flicker like twin moons caught in a storm. Same goes for me, just with fewer superpowers. She tilted her head, curious again, and asked, "Why are you not afraid?" Kane shrugged, hands tucked into broken armor plates. "Because I've seen worse than death, and none of it glowed like you do." Zerine looked down, her fingers curling slightly as if trying to hold on to something invisible. "You think this is beauty, but it is a cage." She lifted her hand and pointed to her chest. "This is not my choice, this bond, this power. It was forced on me, shaped into me. I was never meant to be a weapon." Kane took one slow step forward. "So what do you want to be?" The question hit her harder than she expected. Her eyes widened, her lips parted. And she almost stepped back, but the dome held her in place, as if it too was waiting for her answer. "I don't know," she whispered. "No one has ever asked me that before." Kane moved to her side and sat down again, legs crossed, eyes locked on the glowing threads that ran through the dome's surface. "Then maybe it's time to find out." Zerine turned her gaze to the sky above, to the stars barely visible through the flickering shield, and spoke again. "You cannot stay here. They will come for you." He looked at her without flinching. "Let them." She stared, confused by his calm. "You don't understand. If we remain close for too long, the bond will grow. And if it grows beyond the shell, it cannot be undone." Kane reached into his jacket and pulled out a small badge, cracked and worn, a symbol of Earth's fractured command. "I lost everything already, so maybe this bond is the only thing I have left." Zerine walked in slow circles, her steps smooth like time itself was pausing for her, her fingers trailing the edge of the dome. "They will hunt you, Kane, not because of what you've done, but because of what I might become if you stay." Kane stood again, taller this time, sharper somehow. "Then we give them something they can't predict." She stopped, her back to him, her voice hollow and soft. "What do you want from me?" He took another step forward, close enough now to hear the strange music humming from her body, like echoes of songs the stars forgot. "I want to understand you, not as a weapon, not as a queen, just as you." Zerine turned to face him, her eyes full of storms and stars and sorrow. And for the first time since her prison formed, her expression cracked, not in rage, but in something more fragile hope. Without warning, the dome pulsed hard, the floor lit up in spirals of alien script. And Kane stumbled back. "What's happening?" he asked, hand on the hilt of his rusted sidearm. Zerine closed her eyes and whispered, "The bond is responding. It sees your intent, and now it seeks balance." Before he could ask what that meant, the world around him twisted, not violently, but smoothly, like being pulled through water made of memories. He blinked, and the battlefield was gone. Now they stood in a black void, lit only by floating pieces of moments. Zerine as a child, trained in silence, punished for laughter, wired to machines. Her power forced awake before she knew how to speak. Kane reached out, but his hand passed through the memories like smoke. Zerine stood beside him, eyes closed, her voice trembling now. "This is my memory space, my prison within a prison. You should not be here unless the bond is chosen." Kane didn't move away. He stood beside her and whispered, "Then let it choose." The void shifted again, and now Kane saw something different. A glowing chamber where alien leaders argued over her future. Words like asset and code trigger and containment risk echoing like thunder. Zerine turned to him. They feared what I might feel, so they removed my choices now. The bond reads yours, Kane nodded. Then let it read this. He reached out and placed his hand over hers. Their fingers touching for the first time, light exploded through the memory space. Not fire, not pain, but a warm surge that felt like standing in the center of a heartbeat. Zerine gasped and opened her eyes. The dome reappeared around them, the real world rushing back. Alarms still flashing, soldiers still shouting. But something had changed. The dome's light now golden, no longer defensive but pulsing with slow rhythm. Like breath shared between two beings no longer alone. Kane looked around, then at her. So what now? Zerine stepped close, her hand no longer glowing, her eyes soft. Now you stay. Kane didn't argue, didn't joke, he just nodded outside. Chaos reigned as ships realigned and orders were screamed across fractured channels. Inside, a bond had formed, unexpected, unstoppable. Something even the oldest races hadn't foreseen, and far away, across stars that had not yet been charted. Something stirred once more, not with hunger this time, but with interest, because now the key was active, but not alone. Now the weapon had a will and a witness, and that changed everything. The dome was quiet again, glowing softly like a sleeping sun. Kane stood just a breath away from Zerine now, the air between them filled with heat and something deeper, something alive. Outside, chaos boiled. Ships moved like sharks through the sky. Alien soldiers regrouped, scanning the dome with weapons ready. Unsure whether to fire or flee inside, Kane watched Zerine as she placed one hand over the ground. Her fingers glowing like stars pressed into flesh. Alien markings lit up beneath her palm. Forming a symbol he could not understand, she whispered. Something in her own tongue, words that sounded like wind through glass. Like thunder trapped in a whisper, Kane leaned in, his voice low and steady. You okay? Zerine's eyes fluttered open. Her breath slow. The bond is changing things. It's waking parts of me they tried to keep sealed. He crouched beside her, one knee pressing into the smooth stone that pulsed like it had veins. What kind of parts? She looked at him, something like fear flickering behind her silver gaze, memory, instinct, desire to leave, to burn, to take back what was stolen. Kane placed his hand gently over hers. You don't have to burn anything, we just need a way out. Her lips parted, and for the first time, he saw her smile. Not wide, not confident, but soft, broken, real. The dome suddenly shook, just once, just enough to crack the air like thunder. Kane jumped to his feet, his hand on his sidearm, his body ready to fight. Zerine stood beside him now, her power curling around her body like steam from a boiling star. They are trying to collapse the field. Kane looked toward the glow outside. Saw alien tanks moving into position, saw massive generators powering up, and the distant pulse of orbital cannons charging above the clouds. They think you're unstable, Kane said, eyes narrowing. They think I'm the trigger, Zerine nodded slowly. They are not wrong. Before he could respond, her entire body lit up, not in anger, but in clarity, in decision, the bond glowing around her like a second skin. Kane, she said, if we stay here, they will end us both. He clenched his jaw, voice rough. Then we don't stay. Zerine raised both hands, the dome around. Them spinning now, faster and faster, lines of alien code climbing through the air. Symbols rewriting themselves in real time, Kane watched in awe as the dome began to peel open. Not upward, but inward, folding into itself like a flower reversing. Bloom, revealing a tunnel beneath them that hadn't been there before. "What is that?" he asked, eyes wide. Zareen stepped forward, her voice stronger than ever before. "My memory is not only pain, it holds secrets they buried beneath my name. Escape routes they built in case they ever lost control." Kane smiled. "They underestimated you." She looked back at him, her eyes fierce. "They always did." The moment she stepped onto the platform below, alarms howled louder than ever. The ground above shook, and the sky lit up with fire as the orbital cannon fired. The beam struck the spot where the dome had been seconds ago, vaporizing the stone into glass, but Kane and Zareen were already gone, sliding through a tunnel that shimmered with ancient light, the walls alive with alien data and broken oaths. The deeper they moved, the warmer it became, not heat from fire, but heat from presence, from something waking up. Kane touched one of the walls and felt it pulse, like touching the side of a beast too big to see. "This place is alive," Zareen nodded. "It is part of me. Part of what they used to control my power. Now it answers to the bond." As they ran deeper, shadows began to crawl along the walls, shapes that flickered like ghosts. Kane pulled his weapon, but Zareen stopped him with one glance. "They are not enemies," she said. "They are echoes." The shapes whispered as they passed, calling Kane by name, calling Zareen by titles she had never told him. Names that dripped with fear and reverence. Breaker of light, mother of flame, she who speaks and stars fall. Kane looked at her, a grin fighting its way onto his lips. "Those sound like titles you'd put on a business card." Zareen rolled her eyes for the first time, a gesture so human it made him laugh even as the walls shook behind them. Explosions echoed from above. The enemy had discovered the tunnel. They were descending now, step by step, chasing the ones they had caged for so long. Zareen raised her hand and the tunnel bent, stone folding and locking behind them, cutting off the sound. For a moment of silence, she turned to Kane, voice calm. "They will not stop until they tear me apart again." Kane stepped close, hands firm on her shoulders. "Then we make sure they can't catch you." Suddenly, the tunnel opened into a chamber so wide it looked like a planet's core, a black lake in the middle, and rising from it, a silver ship shaped like a blade, forged by time itself. Kane stared, his voice soft. "That's ours," Zareen nodded. "It was buried with my heartbeat, set to rise only when the bond awakened." As they crossed the bridge of light that led to the ship, Kane looked back once, heard the sound of walls shattering, enemies breaking through, footsteps growing louder. Zareen reached the ship first, placing her hand on its surface, and the vessel responded with a hum that shook the very ground. Kane turned to cover the rear, aiming into the dark, hearing the hiss of plasma charges being loaded. "Zareen," he said. "We've got company." She looked at him, eyes blazing, her voice a vow. "Then let them come." And as the ship opened and pulled them inside, the chamber began to collapse, rock turning to fire, air to light. But Kane didn't look back. He didn't need to, because the moment he stood beside her, he knew they were no longer running, they were rising together. The silver ship rose like a ghost from the lake of black light. Its skin shimmered with reflections of memories and war, ancient yet untouched. Waiting for her return, Kane stood beside Zareen inside the glowing command chamber, the walls alive with pulsing veins of energy, symbols flowing like rivers across metal that felt more like skin than steel. He looked around with wide eyes, breathing slow. "This thing feels alive." Zareen nodded, placing her hand on the core crystal rising from the center. It was built from me. It knows my blood. It moves with my thought. Kane stepped closer, watching as the panels reacted to her presence, glowing brighter when she spoke. Then I hope it knows how to fly, the ship answered before she could. A low hum rising beneath their feet, a warm vibration that felt like a heartbeat preparing to leap above them. The tunnel collapsed fully, fire and stone crashing behind, chasing them like a dying god's scream. Zerine closed her eyes, whispered in her ancient tongue, and the ship lifted, not with thrusters or flame, but with silence, smooth as thought, sharp as a blade unsheathed for war. As they ascended through hidden paths of folded space, Kane looked out the curved window and saw the stars blur. The battlefield now far behind, but they both knew it wouldn't be over, not yet. They'll track us, Kane said, adjusting the cracked straps of his gear. They'll send everything they've got. Zerine turned slowly, her expression unreadable. Let them try. Moments later, the ship pulsed with alarm. Not sound but sensation, and Kane felt it before. He saw it, a presence pressing against them like a predator just outside the light. They're here already, he said, stepping toward the display as dozens of signals lit up, fast and sharp. How the hell did they find us this quick? Zerine stared at the swirling lights, her voice tense. They didn't track the ship. They tracked me. Kane frowned. The bond, she nodded. It echoes through space now, like a beacon. Every moment we're connected, they get closer. Kane clenched his fists, pacing, thinking fast. Then we need to break line of sight. Lose them and assist them with interference. Zerine moved her hands over the console, lines of glowing text flooding the air. There's a planet, not mapped on most charts, filled with magnetic storms and deep gravity wells. It can hide us for a time. Kane looked at her, his voice calm but hard. Then take us there. The ship shifted its path instantly, jumping between folds of space like a shadow skipping across mirrors. But the enemy followed, fast and furious, their ships burning, trails like wolves on the scent. As the storm world appeared ahead, a spinning sphere wrapped in clouds and lightning, Kane felt the first jolt. The ship shuddered as weapons fired from behind. He staggered, grabbed a handle. Shields. Zerine raised both hands, her energy flaring. The ship responded by unfolding panels of glowing armor that crackled with her power. The blasts hit, lighting the sky with fire, but the ship held, dipping low into the planet's atmosphere, smoke trailing behind them as thunder swallowed the stars. Inside, lights flickered, power shifted, and Kane moved to the back, checking compartments. We're hit bad. We need to set down before something explodes. Zerine guided the ship with focus, her eyes glowing like the storm outside. There is a canyon system below, deep enough to hide, wide enough to land. They dropped fast, wind screaming against the hull, lightning cracking like a whip across the sky. Kane could feel the heat crawling into the ship's bones. When they finally landed, the impact shook dust loose from the ceiling. The ship groaned like something alive in pain, but it held together. Barely. Kane stepped out first, boots crunching into red rock, the air thick with static, his hand on his weapon as he scanned the ridges. Zerine followed, slower, her steps light, the storm weaving through her hair like threads of fire. Not the best landing, Kane said, but I've had worse. Zerine looked around, her senses wide. They will come even here. The bond pulls them like gravity. Kane turned to her, serious now. Then we fight, we trap. We strike first. For the next hour, Kane worked in silence, placing charge mines along the canyon walls, setting up motion decoys. digging into the dirt like a soldier born for survival. Zerine watched him, fascinated. You fight like you've always been hunted. He glanced at her with a grim smile. I have, just never with someone worth protecting before. Her gaze lowered, her voice a whisper. You still don't fear me. Kane stepped closer, wiped dust from her cheek with the back of his hand. I don't fear what you were. I believe in what you're becoming. She closed her eyes, leaning into the touch for just a moment. Then the warning came, sharp and sudden, a flash in the sky, black ships cutting through the storm like blades. Engines burning hot, weapons armed. Kane backed up, eyes locked on the cliffs. Showtime. Zerine raised her hands, the ground under her feet glowing, the air thick with her energy. The enemy landed fast, elite teams spilling from their transports. Dark armor, masked faces, moving like shadows trained to kill gods. Kane fired first, his shots hitting clean, dropping two before they could aim. But more kept coming, too many, too fast. Zerine sent a wave of light through the ground, the canyon. Shook, traps detonated, rocks fell, fire rose, but still they pushed forward. Kane took a hit to the shoulder, stumbled, fell, blood running hot. Zerine screamed, not in fear but fury, her power exploding outward, a pulse so strong it knocked the nearest attackers off their feet. She ran to him, dropped beside him, her hands glowing over his wound, her voice low and shaking. You cannot die here, not now. Kane looked up at her, pain sharp, breath shallow. Then fight, don't hold back. Her eyes burned as she turned, standing tall as the wind tore around her, as the lightning answered her cry. And for the first time, the hunters saw what she truly was. Not a weapon, not a prisoner, but a storm. Given shape, and they understood too late that they were the prey now. The storm roared over the canyon like a beast without chains. Lightning split the sky in crooked veins, and beneath it all, Zerine stood over Kane's wounded body like a shield made of light and fury. Her hands glowed brighter with each second, her breath slow but sharp, and the wound on Kane's shoulder sizzled under the healing pulse of her power. He gritted his teeth, half-conscious, staring up at her face. You always glow this much, or am I just lucky? Zerine didn't smile this time. Her eyes were fixed on the ridge above where more soldiers gathered, their weapons locked on her, their helmets reflecting her image like a nightmare remembered. They don't want me anymore, she said, her voice low like thunder hiding beneath the wind. They want you, Kane coughed, forced himself to sit up, blood still staining the dirt beneath him. I told you I was reckless. She looked at him with something deeper than fear now, something close to grief. The bond has changed me, but it's changing you too. Kane pressed a hand to his side, tried to rise but staggered. Then let it. I'm not leaving you. Here, more enemy craft descended from the sky, their engines shrieking against the air, dropping shock troops wrapped in black armor and glowing symbols. The commander among them stepped forward, his voice amplified through a mask. Zerine, step away from the human. He is interfering with containment. He will be terminated. Zerine didn't move, didn't blink. She only spoke 3 words. He is mine. The commander raised his hand and the soldiers aimed, weapons crackling. Eyes behind masks locked on Kane's frame. Kane clenched his fists, teeth grit, ready to fight even with a broken body. But Zerine stepped in front of him, her robes snapping in the wind like fire given shape. I warned you, she whispered. I told you not to follow. The ground beneath her cracked, veins of blue fire surged through the rock, and with one motion of her hands, the canyon walls responded, stones sliding like living pieces. reshaping themselves around Kane like armor from the earth itself. The enemy opened fire, but the blasts curved mid-air, redirected into the storm. Their energy pulled away by Zarene's will. She walked toward them, not running, not hiding, her feet not touching the ground. Her power folding the storm around her like wings made of lightning and memory. "You took everything from me," she said as she moved. "My voice, my name, my choice." The soldiers began to fall back, something in her presence undoing them. Before they could fire again, Zarene reached the center of their formation and raised her hand, her power spiraling around her like a storm caught in a single breath. The commander shouted, "Detonate the failsafe." Kane heard it. His eyes widened. Zarene, no. But it was too late. The failsafe was not a bomb, not a trap. It was a code, a last command wired into her blood long ago. A signal to shut her down if she ever turned against them. Zarene froze in midair, her eyes wide with pain, her body twitching as the command surged through her, electricity pouring from her spine to her skull. Kane rose, limping, bleeding, staggering toward her, every step a scream in his muscles. The enemy soldiers watched, confused, unsure whether to shoot him or flee. Kane reached her, grabbed her wrist, and shouted, "Fight it! You're not theirs anymore. You're not a weapon." Zarene's body trembled, her hands curling into fists, her mouth open but silent, the storm around her beginning to flicker. "They do not own you," Kane said, pressing his forehead to hers. "They never did." The bond flared, a blinding pulse of white light that cracked the failsafe's code into dust. Zarene's scream filled the canyon like a second storm, and in that moment, the storm obeyed her again. She turned, eyes burning, face streaked with tears and rage, and unleashed her power not as destruction, but as rejection. The enemy was flung back, their ships torn from the sky, their weapons shattered by force that didn't kill, but removed every trace of control they thought they had. Zarene dropped to her knees, gasping, the glow around her flickering like a dying sun. Kane caught her before she hit the ground, held her close, whispering her name again and again. She opened her eyes slowly, voice faint. "You saved me." Kane shook his head. "No. You broke yourself free. More ships were coming now, darker ones, heavier ones, not just soldiers but warbringers. Engines so loud they shook the ground." With their presence alone, Kane looked up, knowing they couldn't run again, knowing she couldn't fight in this state. "We have to hide," he said, dragging her toward the canyon's edge, searching for shelter, for a shadow deep enough to disappear inside. Zarene clung to him weakly, her voice barely a whisper. "There is one place, deep below. My people once built a vault there, not for weapons, but for truth." Kane nodded. "Then that's where we go." He found the path behind the rocks, half buried by time and dust, carried her through the twisting darkness while the world above shook under thunder and war. He didn't stop, didn't rest. Not until they reached the vault door, an ancient seal glowing faintly at her touch. It opened with a sigh like a giant waking from a long sleep, and inside was a space untouched by war, cold, silent, filled with old lights and old questions. Kane laid her down gently, brushed hair from her face and said, "Rest. I'll watch the door." Zarene gripped his hand, her fingers cold, but her voice clear. "They will not stop, not until you are taken, not until I am turned again." Kane leaned closer, eyes steady. "Then we don't let them, not now, not ever." And in the shadows of that vault, two fugitives held on to something the whole galaxy feared but never understood, a choice made without fear, a bond forged not by chains, but by defiance. And far above, The enemy whispered his name now too, not just hers. Because the reckless human was no longer just a problem. He had become the target. The vault was cold and silent, its walls humming with the memory of a people long forgotten. The only light came from faint blue veins in the stone, pulsing like a slow heartbeat. Kane sat beside Zerine, her head resting in his lap. Her breath shallow but steady. His eyes scanned the chamber again and again, looking for traps, signals, anything that might betray their location. But this place felt different, untouched by war, hidden beneath layers of silence and time, even. The enemy above hesitated to descend, as if this place whispered warnings they could not explain. Zerine stirred, her voice a soft threat in the darkness. This was once a sanctuary, before they turned it into a prison of secrets. Kane looked down, brushing strands of silver from her cheek. "You sure we're safe here?" She nodded slowly, eyes half closed. "For now, yes, but they will come eventually. Even legends can only hold fear for so long." Kane helped her sit up, her movements weak but no longer trembling. "Then we use whatever's left down here to hit them first." Zerine turned her head toward the far wall, where carvings twisted like vines, glowing faintly. "The knowledge stored here was locked away when I was just a child. It holds pieces of who I was meant to be before they rewrote me." Kane stood, approached the wall, placed his hand against the carvings. The stone warmed under his touch, reacting not to his blood, but to his presence. Beside her, the carvings began to move, reshaping into symbols that hovered in the air. Stories unfolding in light and memory. He saw visions of Zerine as a child, smiling, curious, walking among her people before the Empire came, before they declared her dangerous for the gifts she carried. Kane's jaw tightened, his fists clenched. "They feared you because they couldn't control you." Zerine stepped beside him, her hand joining his on the wall. "They feared what I might inspire." Another section of the chamber shifted, revealing a pedestal where a small orb floated, glowing with layers of code and language Kane couldn't read. Zerine's eyes widened. "That's the core key. It was meant to awaken my full inheritance. But they hid it from me. They feared what it would make me remember." Kane looked at her, steady and calm. "Then it's time you remembered everything." Zerine reached forward, her fingers brushing the orb, and the room exploded with light. Not heat, not fire, but truth. Visions slammed through her mind, her people calling her by her true name, her real voice singing through halls of starlight, her strength not meant for war but for creation. Kane watched her body tremble, not in pain but in awakening, the glow around her brighter than ever before, her form rising into the air as the bond surged again. Stronger than anything before, the vault shook. The enemy above felt the pulse and screamed warnings across their combs, but it was already too late. Zerine descended slowly, her feet touching the ground without a sound, her eyes now glowing pure white, her body calm but charged with energy that felt eternal. Kane stepped closer, unsure for the first time. "Zerine," she turned to him, her voice layered, no longer alone. "I am whole now. I remember who I was, who I am, and what they tried to bury." Kane exhaled. "Then let's show them what they failed to destroy." The vault opened at her command, stairs unfolding from the walls, pathways rising like veins reaching for the surface. They emerged beneath a blood-red sky, the storm still raging but now parting before her, the wind bending around her body like it recognized its queen. The enemy fleet hovered above, dark ships spreading across the sky like a metal disease, their weapons charged, their soldiers watching. The canyon with dead silence. One ship descended fast, landing hard. the ground shaking beneath its weight. The commander from before stepped out. His voice amplified again, cold and sharp. "Zerine, by order of the Sovereign Empire, you are declared a rogue construct. The human beside you is now classified as bonded property. Surrender or be destroyed," Kane snorted, stepping forward with his hand resting on his sidearm. "He talks too much." Zerine raised her hand slowly, her voice like thunder wrapped in silk. "I am not your construct, and he is not your target." Commander raised his weapon, but never got the chance to fire. Zerine unleashed a single pulse, not of heat, not of destruction, but of raw memory. A wave that hit every ship, every soldier, every machine with the truth of what had been done. They saw what she endured, how she was taken, shaped, chained, and how the human who stood beside her never flinched. Some dropped to their knees, some screamed, some fled, but most simply froze, not knowing how to respond to power that refused. To kill yet couldn't be ignored, Kane walked beside her through the silence, hand still near his weapon, but no longer needed. The commander collapsed to his knees, his helmet falling off, revealing a face soaked in sweat and disbelief. "What are you?" Zerine looked down at him. Not with hate, not with pity, but with certainty. "I am what your empire feared, and what your people will remember." The sky above them cleared slowly, the storm fading as if it too had made its choice, the stars blinking through the clouds. Like witnesses returning to the trial, Kane turned to her. "So what now?" Zerine stepped toward the canyon's edge, her voice quiet. "Now we build what they tried to erase." He nodded, walking beside her, his hand finding hers without a word. Their bond no longer just a thread of light, but a foundation carved in defiance and trust. Across the galaxy, the story would spread. The tale of the princess no one dared to approach, and the reckless human who stepped forward. And from that day on, the Empire knew it had made its greatest mistake, not in creating her, but in letting him find her, because together they were not just a force, they were a beginning, and the stars would never forget them. The truth is out. The stars remember. Subscribe now and never miss the next story that changes everything. If you believe humanity always finds a way, subscribe for more HFY sci-fi stories that prove it.